Good morning, Javier Becerra. And forgive me, I do this all the time. I used to do this in Congress. I'd have to do there 435, so I'd always give my name and my title. So Javier Becerra, Attorney General for the state of California. Just habit. Here today because we've had some developments on healthcare that are crucial to Californians and, quite honestly, to millions of Americans. It's now time for insurance companies to provide the health exchange markets throughout the country, including here in California through the Covered California Exchange, their rates for health insurance plans for consumers next year. So all American families and Californians will soon know what rates these health insurance companies will charge them to be able to continue with their affordable health care plans that they received under the Affordable Care Act. Here's the difficulty for these insurance companies. For the last several months, they've been trying to juggle numbers and figure out what costs they'll incur to offer insurance plans to millions of Americans because of the uncertainty, the unpredictability that continues to surround the Affordable Care Act as a result of President Donald Trump's explicit efforts to undermine the Affordable Care Act. He has gone as far as to say he will explode the Affordable Care Act. He has gone as far as to threaten the cost-sharing subsidies that most American families rely on to help cover the cost of their deductibles, their co-payments, and their co-insurance in their insurance plans. What makes those plans affordable is that those families can take their son or daughter to a hospital and know that they're only going to be charged so much for that hospital stay. If that goes away, then there are a whole bunch of American families who don't know if they can afford to use their health insurance. And so, quite honestly, the front lines here, the insurance companies, are in a predicament. They're trying to guess what their rates should be. And they're guessing what they should be because the Trump administration has been unwilling to give them some predictability about what they can expect to receive through the Affordable Care Act from the federal government to help make these plans affordable. That was the entire concept behind the Affordable Care Act, is to make these plans affordable. It's tough to do if the federal government is constantly extorting you on whether or not it's going to provide the support that the federal government promised under the Affordable Care Act. And so it shouldn't surprise anyone that the Trump-generated instability, unpredictability, has made it difficult for insurance companies to determine what their rates will be for next year. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that they're hedging by charging more for next year's insurance plans than this year, just in case. My friends, that's the classic definition of sabotage. And that's what we're seeing right now, is an effort to undermine the successful affordability in the Affordable Care Act by undermining the ability to continue that very affordability. That's why yesterday, many of us took notice that the Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia also took a very crucial action. Because you see, for California, which has the most successful health insurance market in America using the Affordable Care Act, even for us, the instability is causing rates to jump. It's driving up costs for California families. And all those hundreds of thousands of California families who rely on the cost-sharing subsidies to keep their deductibles and their co-payments and their co-insurance lower are seeing what happens when Donald Trump threatens to not provide the federal government's share of those cost-sharing subsidies. And so yesterday, Covered California announced that rates for its insurance plans will go up. And if Donald Trump continues to threaten to provide the cost-sharing subsidies, they could go up an additional 12.4%. That's a lot of money for a lot of families. And it's all only because of the extortionist tactics being employed by the Trump administration to try to undermine, to try to sabotage the Affordable Care Act. More than 6 million Americans rely on these cost-sharing subsidies. Hundreds of thousands here in California rely on these cost-sharing subsidies. And millions more are impacted by this uncertainty in the health insurance marketplace. So even if you're not getting your insurance through the Affordable Care Act, there's a good chance that the ripples of this instability caused by Donald Trump will affect your insurance rates for health care as well. And that's why back in May, on May 18th, a coalition of 18 states and the District of Columbia, led by California, filed a motion in the D.C. Circuit Court to intervene in a case that jeopardizes these very cost-sharing subsidies. And yesterday, as I mentioned, the Court of Appeal granted our motion to intervene in that case. And so as a result of that motion being granted, today California, along with New York, Kentucky, Iowa, Virginia, Massachusetts, a total, as I said, of 18 states and the District of Columbia are ready to stand up for American families who rely on those cost-sharing subsidies in order to afford their health insurance. We're not going to wait to find out what Donald Trump wants to do. The Circuit Court has now told us you can step up and defend access to affordable health care and preserve those cost-sharing subsidies. And so that's what we're going to do. We're now ready to move in court and do exactly that for the millions of Americans who can't afford to wait till Donald Trump decides whether it's going to be affordable for them to send their daughter or their son to the hospital. What happens next? Well, now that we have standing, we're ready to go. My team is ready to defend these subsidies in court. We are going to do everything we can to work with whomever is interested, whether it's the Trump administration or Congress, to make sure that we continue to provide people with affordable health care, that we don't place them in this limbo simply because someone is willing to explode the marketplaces. And we're going to do this in a way that shows to the American people that we're not going to go back to those days when health care was for the healthy or the wealthy. Insurance for health care is something all of us should be able to count on. And we're going to do everything we can here in California to make sure Californians, and as a consequence, Americans throughout this country, can rely on affordable health care, not just through the Affordable Care Act, but through a health care system which should be the best in the world. I thank you all for coming.